Over the last 10 years, we have been at the forefront with global brands using our software. We have a history of working with brands that actually wanted to change their industries. They didn't just need to raise brand awareness. They needed to mobilize public support, change the minds of those in power, and ultimately create structural change at the government and regulatory levels. However, it is clear that this is an area that is seeing more action than ever. And one of our partners, Edelman, in their latest Trust Barometer report, highlights why it's a space that any sensible company can no longer ignore. What you're seeing here are just some of the highlights from that report, where we have 68% of consumers believing that their power to force corporations actually is change. 62% of employees believe they have the power to force corporations to change, whether or not that be the ones they are working for or ones that they are consumers of. And 50% of employees are likely, than the last year, to voice any objections to their management or engage in a workplace protest. What we're seeing is that stakeholder engagement for any corporation is more important now than it ever has been. And so we have 5 kind of key strategies that we've identified that work across the board with that. Up first, say goodbye to this concept of big data. You need to be smarter with the data you collect. Don't just collect it for the fun of collecting data, right? Analyze and aggregate it to actually paint a picture of the individual who is behind that data. It is not just about spreadsheets. It's about understanding who the individual is and why you want them to take action. Identify your data goals. What are you actually collecting this data for? It shouldn't be vanity metrics, right? You should be understanding what your goals are with your data. And last but not least, what is their relationship to your organization? Why are they involved? Is it a stakeholder? Is it an elected official? Is it someone who is in the local community that you're trying to persuade based on what actions you want them to take? Number 2 is finding your 5%. So the top 5% of your database or your audience are what we refer to as your leaders or your advocates. You actually need these people if you hope to create any type of advocacy program or stakeholder engagement program where you are driving people to action. 92% of stakeholders are more likely to act based on a friend's referral over any traditional marketing effort. It is so important to identify the people who are organically doing this work on your behalf so that they can ultimately create their networks and bring them into the organizing work that you're doing. And lastly is 4.7% of typical companies' base drives 100% of its word of mouth. That is a really important data point for you to think about as you're creating these programs to really drive organic recruitment efforts within the base you're already engaging with. Thirdly, build a strong community. I am so excited for the panelists that we have today because in our prep conversations, all we got into is this idea of organizations actually needing to build a community. To do that, you have to understand your audiences. There are going to be different buckets of people, whether it be elected officials or your local chambers of commerce, selectmen, etc., that you need to speak to in a very intentional way to actually drive engagement within your community. You need to build trust through authentic engagement. It cannot be boilerplate press language. It just can't. It has to be authentic from your actual supporters. Can't just come from leadership. That's what we've seen. And lastly is empower local leaders to engage their networks. It is so much more powerful if someone in the local community is actually sharing a message as opposed to a company coming into a local community and forcing that message. Fourth, privacy by default. You need to gain consent. Long gone are the days of buying a list and just email blasting it because you can. You are not going to get authentic engagement from these people. This has been one of the core tenets at NationBuilder that our customers own and can effectively manage their own data. You need to develop clear paths of engagement for your advocates. There is no point in sending someone to a petition that doesn't have a follow-up. Why am I signing the petition? What's it going to do? What does it matter if I reach out to this legislature, right? You really need to make it clear what those ladders of engagement are. And know who, how, and when people want to be in conversation with you. Some people may absolutely love to receive mailers. Some people may only want to communicate via text. You should know that about your audience and therefore direct your communications in that way. And last but not least, this one is fairly obvious, but personalization is key. It is so worth mentioning this because it is a tactic that still we see to this day that many companies overlook. A personalized experience from your website is a thing that your audience actually has come to expect. they come to understand that you are tracking what they're doing. So therefore, if you're doing that, render that data in a meaningful way. Don't just track data for the sake of data. Think back to number one here. Make it personalized. Allow for people to actually engage with your content in a personal way. Reflect back what your advocates have done for your organization. There are so many strategies and tactics that we could talk about in this space, but the key here is if someone has done something for you, share that with them, thank them, take them on a customized journey based on how they've engaged with you. And lastly, develop dynamic asks for your advocates based on that historic engagement. For example, if someone has never, ever, ever taken legislative action, that's probably not going to be the best call to action to give them in a first email when they've ever heard from you, right? Think about it. Be strategic in how you actually communicate with folks using dynamic content.